that we take this in private. Thank you. Now turn to the substantive business of the day, which is the first oral evidence session on the Legal Services Scotland Bill. May I formally introduce Professor Frank Stephen, Head of the School of Law at the University of Manchester, who is the committee's advisor on this bill. Can I now turn to the first panel of witnesses and welcome Sue Aspinall, Team Leader Professions, and Kyla Brand, OFT representative in Scotland. They are both from the Office of Fair Trading and are joined this morning by Julia Clarke, Principal Public Affairs Officer, Which. Can I thank you very much indeed for your attendance this morning, ladies, and we'll move straight to questioning, which will be opened by Bill Butler.
Thank you, Convener. Good morning, colleagues. How will the bill, and in particular the establishment of new business structures, benefit consumers of legal services in Scotland? Perhaps OFT firstly, and then Which.
Well, thank you very much indeed, and thanks to the committee for inviting us to help you in your inquiry here. I think that we believe that allowing law firms to adapt their business models to a model of their choice and to allow other professionals will give consumers more choice. So that's the first issues. But it will also deliver economies of scale and enhance access to justice. The ways in which that might work are that the legal professionals who choose to operate in the same business with other professionals will be able to share overheads, perhaps offer a one-stop shop, so there'll be more flexibility about the services that they can offer. And that will really benefit, particularly perhaps in local communities where somebody, a business or an individual consumer, might wish to gain services both from a lawyer and an accountant, or a lawyer and a surveyor, for example. But the other provisions of the bill, which will allow firms to attract non-legal staff and managerial skills, we believe will really assist them in providing new models of service and better customer service. We heard this a lot when we were doing our inquiry in response to the Which super complaint, both from solicitors and from consumer bodies. So that improved level of service is something which we would look for. But we'd also know that from the larger firms that they think that they will be able, by using outside finance, to develop more dynamic models of service, and those will be not just about enabling them to compete in the wider international arena, but actually delivering those sorts of client services in a more effective fashion. So those are our principal points, I think, on those aspects of MDPs.
As regards specifically on the provisions of the bill, we feel that, providing for regulatory objectives and provisions for lay involvement in the governance of the Law Society will greatly assist and contribute to consumer confidence in this market. However, we must say that we feel that the consumer benefit would have been greater if members of the Faculty of Advocates were also allowed to join and become members of these new business models.
Take that on board, and I'm sure the Faculty of Advocates will note that point. Ms Clarke? Do you want to?
Well, we really agree pretty well with the OFT on this. We do think that the lack of competition in legal services was what caused us to launch the super complaint, really. We feel that there are much newer ways of doing business which will provide benefits for consumers. Our experience is that consumers particularly like one-stop shops, especially around housing, purchase and selling, and we think there will be economies to be delivered which will really affect the prices in favour of the consumer, which is obviously a good thing.
Thank you very much for that, colleagues. You talk about the benefits and you talk about the provisions of the bill. I wonder if there's any danger, in your view, of any disbenefits to consumers. For instance, some people have said that there's perhaps a danger that outside ownership may lead to law firms offering only profitable legal services. What do you think of that?
Well, I think that it would be a mistake to imagine that many unprofitable services were currently being offered, and I think we hear of deserts in legal provision already. So I think that there are ways in which you can see that the limitations of the current arrangements actually restrict supply of some types of law in certain places. And we do hear about limitations of supply in terms of family law, housing, debt services and so on in various places. So I think that that is already a feature of the market, and it's perhaps an argument for including new models which would make it easier to meet some of those market needs.
I think then that the deserts, as you call them, can be made to grow again because of this bill?
I think that if you open a system up and you allow people to create new models that they believe that will meet a market need, then yes, you may well find new areas of service.
Right, so that in your view then, Ms Brand, there are no disbenefits to the consumer that you can envisage in respect of the provisions of this bill?
The success of any new system depends on the robust way in which it is regulated. For us, consumer protection is a very high priority. We believe that competition between services is one of the ways in which actually you deliver that consumer protection. But in addition, you have to have, as is written right through the provisions of the bill, the kind of built-in protection that will enable the consumers of legal services in Scotland to have at least the same protection that they currently have.
Ms Aspinall, do you want to add to that?
Well, just that obviously the interest of the consumer and the public is one of the regulatory objectives of the bill. So the aim... Yeah.
I think that's right. And also, of course, people can continue to practice as they have if they wish to. Nobody will be forced into this new arrangement. So it may be that a sole practitioner may still choose to operate like this, but it may also be the saving of some sole practitioners in these difficult times to share expenses with the local surveyor or the local accountant, etc. So I think it gives them scope to move forward in whatever way they see fit.
Thank you for laying out the theory so clearly. Thank you. Convener.
Stuart Maxwell's got a point on this.
A small supplementary, Convener. Thank you. Julia Clarke mentioned, I think one of the benefits to consumers would be the one-stop shop. And housing was the one you mentioned.
Yes.
What exactly is the difference between what happens now and what would happen as proposed in the bill, given that you can go to one of the large suppliers at the moment, ESPC, GSPC, Aberdeen, etc.
Well, I think, Mr Maxwell, what we'll find is different models arising, really. You know, we'll get some entrepreneurial spark where somebody says, you know, there's a need in this area for someone who's an accountant to go in with with the local lawyer and provide that certain set of services. And you'll also get IT specialists, you'll get people coming into the market who'll do things in a new way, who'll drive it in a different direction, and who'll provide opportunities for people to buy and sell houses in different ways. And, you know, we have the home report, we have a difference already in that market. So I think that the market will adapt to what consumers want, and the prices will reflect that benefit to consumers.
I can see the general point you're making, absolutely, and you talk about accountants and perhaps managerial services and IT. I can see all that. And it was just the issue of housing. I mean, if I go to one of these large suppliers just now, it's pretty much seems to me a one-stop shop. I'm just trying to envisage what the difference would be if I was selling my house if this bill comes into effect.
Well, for instance, different fees are paid in different parts of the home buying and selling process, and I think these could become more transparent. For instance, if you were dealing with a set of professionals together offering different services. I think there are all sorts of opportunities that we can't quite see exactly what they will be, but the market will adapt to what consumers show a preference for, as it usually does.
Okay, thank you.
Robert Brown.
Can I develop that point a little further? I mean, the Law Society at the moment has arrangements to prevent conflicts of interest between solicitors acting for the opposite side of the same transaction and so forth. Now, you mentioned the possibility of lawyers and solicitors and surveyors acting together. Now, the most obvious example, I suppose, where there's things happening in the same context is the single seller survey in the context of a domestic conveyancing operation. I must say I find it extremely difficult to envisage how that could be done by the same provider without an enormous conflict of interest, which would be hugely disadvantageous to the consumer. I wonder perhaps if you would comment on that. and perhaps advise me what sort of services you had in mind.
Well, I think in terms of the home report and the single survey, the surveyors have a legal obligation